So welcome to another in our webinar series on transforming assessment, and we're very pleased today to be able to welcome Bill Warburton and Graham Robinson from the University of Southampton in the UK. Now it's early in the morning for them, so we thank them both for putting aside the time to be able to contribute to this webinar series. We know that everyone's really looking forward to this. You can tell that from the numbers of people who have joined us today. We have people from all over the world, so wherever you are, good morning or good afternoon or good evening. So today we're going to hear about robust e-exams, principles and practical examples, and I'm particularly looking forward to this because e-exams has become a bit of a hot topic lately, and certainly in our webinar series that topic is getting quite a lot of interest. And we know that Bill and Graham have been doing some really interesting work in this area, so we're going to hear about EXAMSTART, and we're going to hear about the e-exam agenda from them. So Bill and Graham, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thanks, Geoff. Okay, I've not done one of these for a very long time, so I have to excuse my being a little rusty. It isn't as early as it might have been. It's actually 8 o'clock really for us here, rather than the 7 o'clock that it was before the clocks went forward. Anyway, I'm going to start off. I'll try and set the context for what we're doing here. I'll hand over to Graham. He will go through some details of what we've set up here, and then I'll finish off towards the end, and as has already been indicated, we'll take questions on the fly. So there are 5 things that we really want to go through. We're taking the trouble to invest a certain amount of time and effort in doing this in the first place. In particular, for the second point, the problems that we've confronted using general purpose public workstations, which most people in the game find a similar challenge. We'll hand over to Graham at that point, and he'll look at how things were before we produced the EXAMSTART system, and these measures are largely ad hoc. And then the more systematic approach that we're using now, the state of play in 2014, and in particular the EXAMSTART portal itself. And then I'll carry on towards the end saying something about where we're hoping to go and possible future developments. So my background is really to do with facilitating CAA uptake in university. CAA is computer assisted assessment, of course, and I've been doing this since 2002. Before that, I had a different existence as an instructor in the computer industry, and before that I was a physics teacher, and that's where I'm kind of coming from. So we know that university exams are of critical importance. Any perceived threat to the integrity of an exam will make the kind of people that manage us very nervous indeed. There have been numerous well-publicised cases of ringers, people sitting exams on behalf of people who we think are actually sitting the exams. This happens particularly with online exercises where it's difficult to be sure of people's identity. This isn't necessarily a particular case in the university where we more or less know who we have, although we have nowadays a cadre of professional invigilators who we would not expect to know the students. There are numerous war stories about wires, hidden earpieces, underneath hair, those of us that have still got it, or indeed veils. We've had some recent ones here, and in particular the well-known one is a fear of people cheating, which of course represents a direct threat to a university's reputation, because these things become widely publicised and make good headlines for newspapers. The things which focus the attention of senior managers these days our recruitment, because we now have a higher education market, students largely are expected to select universities, the ones that they go to, based on their reputations. At the end of the day, they're making an investment themselves. They'll be paying back, certainly in the UK, the cost of their education, and they're not really going to select a university which doesn't give them the best possible fighting chance in the jobs market. League table positions, particularly in the UK, and I think increasingly elsewhere also, are jealously guarded. People watch very carefully whether they've moved up or moved down on the latest set of league tables, which set of league tables indeed is a bit of a hot topic, which ones matter, which ones carry less authority. And as I touched on earlier on, these moral panics, as you might call them in the media, worries about grade inflation. Is the 2-2 that I got 20 years ago now worth less because it's so easy to get a 2-1 now? Popular conception. The idea, particularly current in the press at the moment, is that you can't fail. All shall have prizes. Nobody can, unless they do particularly badly and make it very obvious that they're incapable of taking a course and passing the assessments, could ever possibly fail. These things, I think, are probably more honoured in the rumour than an actual hard fact. But it's a popular conception, and it's something which we struggle against, really. And again, current in the media, these ideas of dumbed down degrees, and people will quote you, oh, my neighbour's niece has got a degree in tourism, or she's studying vampire studies, or something. And all of these things worry senior managers and make them particularly concerned that assessment activities, in particular summative assessment activities, the sorts of things we normally call exams, are conducted in a manner beyond reproach, because of the university's reputation sits on the end of it. So many of the issues and concerns about the robustness of procedures just as being seen to be done are mitigated fully or partly by the adoption of published standards. In the UK we have the British standard. There are other similar standards which may or may not carry the same kind of weight in other countries, and some people base their delivery standards on something like the British standard because it's reasonably well known. Beyond that, people worry about the computer systems themselves being fragile. And again, there are plenty of war stories. If you talk to anybody in higher education about the early days of CAA, then they'll come up with plenty of examples of where something hasn't gone terribly well. We used to reckon that a single bad experience would probably put off about 20 people who would otherwise use the system from using it at all, and that experience, we think, lasts for about 10 years. So the impact of a problem is severe and it's long-lasting. The things that people focus on particularly are the software, the servers, the data networks and the workstations. Those four areas are the particular places where you would look to mitigate risks. And much of the mitigation tends to be a bit ad hoc. There is a lack of systematic attention to these things. We certainly found when we started here. Less so perhaps now. So ideally, when you talk to academics, tutors, managers about what they really want, the thing that comes top of the list is that the university says it's okay to do this. They're not going to get into trouble for using computer-based assessment. Large dedicated CAA spaces, large workstation areas that can accommodate the biggest cohorts, they're very difficult to find. And I'll come back to this a little later on. They do need to be easy to book. You mustn't be competing all the time, so that when you're expecting to do your exam, you find you can't. They need to be easy to manage from the hardware point of view and the software point of view. They need to be easy to invigilate. And again, the smaller the room, then the more expensive it is to invigilate. Nora Modi said quite a lot about this in the literature. And there are a few examples on this. The OU, the Open University of Netherlands, producing a very large dedicated space. Bradford University has already done this, and Edinburgh University have their own solution. There are other examples, but they're difficult to come by because they're expensive. The legacy that most of us work with are these modestly proportioned and flexible spaces with, as we would say, a sort of mixed provenance of workstations, machines of different ages from different manufacturers, different monitors, different mice, different keyboards, sometimes different network infrastructures. Physically separated small workstation spaces, really. They tend to be in different buildings, they may be on different sites, different campuses, they may even be in different parts of the world these days with increasing globalization of the higher education sector. And this is before we start worrying about the important cultural obstacles such as uncooperative registries or you senior managers who don't get it all up prepared to take the risks. Graham, another colleague, and I have written earlier in 2011 about the drawbacks of generic public workstations. That there are some clear problems about this. The small spaces, which are usually fairly inflexible, their modest size, the physical separation, the fact that people can get in there when exams aren't going on and do what they like, and the broad software portfolios, which tend to make startup lengthy and makes it more difficult to find a problem should one occur. These things more or less are common sense. So tutors would like as close as possible a replication of the paper experience, but with productivity benefits, and that's not being flippant. Exams are already onerous, they're already risky, without taking on additional technical risks. So when compiling exams, people who specialise in assessments care particularly about validity. The exams measure what we say we're measuring, reliability, that the test should perform consistently when repeated with a different bunch of students on the same kind of course, and authenticity, that the behaviour needed to pass the test must replicate as closely as possible whichever desired behaviours we describe in our course objectives. But in fact, when it comes down to looking at the electronic rendition of an exam, the things that come out above all are the reliability, that we don't want surprises, we don't like surprises in exams, but they must be robust, there must be no worries about students being able to, for example, browse the internet or use instant messaging. They must be scalable, and particularly these days, certainly in the United Kingdom, where cohorts are growing incrementally and substantially year over year. Successful courses are generated, and they're the ones that tend to survive. And things have to be simple. We don't want to give people much to think about, not the students, and not the tutors, and not the registry. I'm going to hand over to Graham at this point and shut up. He's the technical brain behind EXAMSTART. He's going to talk about what we used to do and what we now do, and he's going to demonstrate some typical sequences for the CAA exams, which you now use EXAMSTART for. Over to you, Graham.
Hello. Hello. So I'm Graham Robinson. I'm an e-learning specialist in the University of Southampton. I'm going to show you two sets of slides, what we used to do and what we currently do. What I would like is, while I'm running through some of these slides, I expect you'll have more opportunity to do it in the past than the present. You've got some buttons underneath your name in the participants field, and one of them is a picture of a tick. And under tick you have yes, no and none. What I'd like is, if I run through some of these slides, when these things start to apply to your institution, I'd like you to tick or cross to say, yeah, this is familiar, or no, this is how I would like it to be. So this is what used to happen. So we have a student turns up at a computer, they hit Control-Alt-Delete and they log in as themselves. So this is the first login that they have to do. But then they just get a desktop. So now they're looking around the room, they're trying to find instruction from the invigilators about where they should go. Well, if this was a class, I'd probably get a Blackboard, so maybe I should get a Blackboard. So they open up Internet Explorer. You've then got the university webpage, homepage, which is this portal, so they log into that. But that didn't really get them into Blackboard, so now they have to go and find Blackboard. Well, eventually we find it. It's nicely under students here. But then you have to log into Blackboard again, so that's the third time now that we've put the username and password in. But then you're in Blackboard and you're sat there worried about your exam, thinking, so which course am I in? Right, okay, I better remember the code for the exam. And then you think, right, okay, so where is my invigilator, where is my tutor actually put the link? Here I am at the announcements page. So eventually you might find your way through to where the exam is. We use Perception, and then when you clicked on that link, it then asks you to log in again, because Perception is a different system to Blackboard, which is a different system to SUST. And then you get some complicated boxes. You know, these students probably have never used Perception before. Do they know whether they need to open or save the document? And we've got some more messages. And finally we get to the exam. And that probably was about 15 minutes worth of work just to actually get all the students in all the rooms and all the places to the right place. And they finish exam and close it. And then the trouble we have is it goes back to the stage where you were at. So it says, oh, it's username and password. And then they click on that again. And then you start getting error messages saying that you've already taken this assessment, and then they think that they've lost all their work. So yes, that's the struggle that we used to have in the past. So now we've got the EXAMSTART system. An EXAMSTART system at the beginning was supposed to be a simple way to get all of our exams together into the same system. The big driver for it was invigilators. So the invigilators just couldn't cope with the different types of exam. We might be able to teach them how to do Perception, but then another exam would come up, and then they get everyone into Blackboard and try and load a Perception exam that doesn't exist. So this is EXAMSTART, same Control-Alt-Delete screen, but this time all they need to do is type the word exam in. It's actually so easy that if we turn up to the room an hour before the exam start, then actually we can just go around all the computers. In the last week, we've even got to the point where we're starting to automate this stage, so we can just make 100 PCs in the room fire up and load EXAMSTART. So then, as soon as EXAMSTART loads, this is what we get to see. So you're locked out of everything. There is nowhere that you can go. You can't get lost. You can't think where you might want to be going, because there is just nowhere to go. After about 2 seconds, what actually happens is we've got a border around this screen. It's green. Green is good. Amber is maybe you should ask your IT person whether everything is okay, and red is really, really bad. So actually, across a whole computer workstation area with all the computers, 150 of them, all of them with their screens on, you can actually just glance across the room and go, this room is okay. So they accept the academic integrity statement. I mean, what are you going to do? You can log out, or you can accept the academic integrity statement. There's not too much you can do, and then we still need to know who they are. So at the moment they've logged in this exam, they are completely anonymous. So they enter their username. We've even separated the username and password out, so when you type your username in, it goes and checks that that's right, so there's no chance that you're putting the right password in the wrong username. If your account is blocked, which would stop you from taking the exam in the first place, it goes off and checks to see whether that account is blocked, and gives an invigilator the chance to do something about it. So I put my username and password in, and now I get my ID card. So another problem that we had was that you needed to have identification to take an exam. So if a student turned up without their ID card, what do you do? Letter of the law, you might have to send them home, but that means that's going to be 3 months before they can take their exam again. If it's semester 1, then it might be 9 months before they can take their supplementary exam to take it again. There was a point where we started taking maybe a driving license, because we said, well, you can have the ID that you could use to go to student services and get another student ID card. But now we don't have to bother at all. If students turned up with without any kind of identification, then this ID card screen comes up. This looks exactly the same as their actual student card. Obviously it says university student for them. And they can compare that against the real person with no issues. And finally, we get to pick an exam system. So this is where it's different between the exams. So we've got a database of rooms, we've got a database of what's going on in those rooms, and then this big giant button in the middle of the screen, which we've actually changed very slightly. I've got another screenshot a little further on about how it looks now. That loads the right exam system. For the invigilator, it doesn't matter what they're doing, the invigilator will have the same experience of going through EXAMSTART with any type of exam that they've got. So just for perception here, I actually load up a new tab with an Internet Explorer window. They typed their password in, so I can pass that password on to perception. So there's no extra login prompt that we've got here for logging into perception. And then actually, because we have complete control over the EXAMSTART and the exam account, we can even suppress the run save dialog box. We can push something in that says launch.qmsv files should automatically be run. There's no reason at all to show the save and cancel boxes. So actually just run the assessment. And then what happens here is perception kicks itself in. So you actually end up leaving the portal and you're now into the standard supported secure browser for perception. And then we finish, we close, and once we close we go back to the logout screen. The logout screen makes you forcibly push a button that says I have logged out of my exam, and then you can log out again. So that's how we do for perception, but we've got some other things that we can do. So I said that we changed the design of this very slightly. So we've made this big button say click here to load. So we've got some students who don't write on paper, people with specific learning differences, they use a computer. So they've got the entire same startup system for that we have for perception. So the invigilator knows how to get them to this point. And then we've got a different product called Site Kiosk. So this is a security bit of software. And what we can do here is load up Word, load up a macro that's inside of Word. We had this before the EXAMSTART system, but what we can do now is because the user has logged into EXAMSTART, we actually know some details about them. We know their name, we know their student ID number. So actually we can make this macro pre-fill in details about the student. So all they now need is the module code and the module title. Once they fill that in, then this macro brings up some details at the top of the screen. So it's anonymized, it's not got their name in it, it's just got their student ID number. The student ID number is printed on the top of every single page. It's got the module title and the module code in it as well, so that when the students print out their work, they've got a piece of work that is exactly the same as the students that sat in the sports hall and wrote their paper out. It's a physical piece of paper that just goes into the pile with the exam books. Write my essay and save it. EXAMSTART ensures that that Word document is automatically saved every 2 minutes, and the students get to print it out, which I've skipped this step. But what happens now is that we've created some work. And once we've created some work in EXAMSTART, When we go to the Logout tab, it doesn't give me the opportunity to log out at all. Before I can log out, I have to empty my Documents folder up into a secure bit of storage. So now when we go to this Logout screen, this Logout button is completely unclickable. The students have to tick the box that says, "I've finished my exam, I will not be able to print," because that work isn't on their computer anymore. They hit upload, the files go off the computer, so the next person that uses it, they don't see any of the previous students' work, and now that the computer is empty and wiped, they can log out again. So those are our two main exams. That's what we had in 2013 when we first showed off the system. But what we've done this time around is we've started adding our web-based and even external web-based exams into the exam system. So we've got this prescribing safety assessment, which just loads up a web page. So what we've been able to do is we can now tell the invigilators, hey, just go into the exam exactly as if it was any other EXAMSTART exam, and they can log into the system with their username and password and get into these kind of pages. So this page is now completely secure. We can say, in this example, the web page is psapilot.net. We can say that check every single link that the students click on. If that link contains psapilot.net/something, then allow the page to go on. If it's edinburgh.ac.uk, because they are the people who created it, and at the bottom it says created in association with edinburgh.ac.uk, it goes, no, you're not allowed to go there. But in this specific instance, we've got some references that the students are allowed to do. So when they click on this BNF link, what we do is we just spawn a new tab at the top. So we've said, okay, you're only allowed onto psapilot.net, but you're also allowed onto the BNF. So if you click on the BNF, then spawn a new tab at the top of the page, allow students to go into there, and then you can have the same kind of rules that allow that you had on the other page. So everything within the BNF is fine, but you then can't go off and click on Facebook, for example. Authentic World is a similar kind of system. So again, it's completely external. You've got a username and password that isn't your university username and password. What we actually found here is that the students weren't very good at actually knowing what their Safe Medicate username and password was. So what we did is we added a University Webmail tab at the top. So if you didn't know what your password was, you could click on the Forgotten Your Password link, and then you could go to your University Webmail, load up your University Webmail, and the Reset Your Password link would come through to here. So then once you're in, you've still got this University Webmail tab at the top of the page, but when you start your exam, we make the exam pop up in replace of the University Webmail. So once the actual exam has started, there's no physical way of accessing your university email, but before the exam starts, then you've got access to your email for that reset a password. So once you're here, there is no webmail. So that's what the student sees. And this is what we've got in our office. So we've got a television up in our office, which has got a whole bunch of services that we very specifically care about in our room. So the things on the left-hand side are that the services is available. And then on the right-hand side, we've got a couple of web pages that sort of loop around. But this is the one that's specific for the exams. So the EXAMSTART system is pinging a server every 2 minutes with a few bits of information, and that information is the the student's username, which exam they've loaded, whether it actually monitors itself to see whether the computer is idle. So active means that they have moved the mouse in the last 2 minutes. Not started means that they might be idle, they might not be idle, but they haven't yet typed a username and password into the EXAMSTART box. Idle means that they haven't moved the mouse within 2 minutes. And no response means that despite the fact that EXAMSTART pings back every minutes, I think minutes, it's a minute or two, to say that the person is still there. After 3 minutes, if it hasn't received a ping, then it comes up as no response. So that generally happens if someone has just shut down the problem. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat and it's replacing some of the words in my head. If they shut down the computer, then you might get a no response. Or if something has crashed, then you might not get a response. We've got a more detailed version of this page, so this isn't particularly suitable for a television, but it's great for on your computer. So here I've got every single computer, the person who's on it, when they logged in, and the amount of time that they've been idle. And at the bottom, at the bottom you can see this is what happens for people who have logged out. So the people who aren't on the computer anymore, we can see that that user who used perception, they logged out at 2:20. But earlier in the morning, someone used Word. And when you use Word, you would expect there to be a file uploaded. So it's checked the files that have been uploaded, and it's expecting a docx file. So on that line, I can see that Robinson, that's me, they uploaded a docx file, and then that pink line is the fact that they uploaded something else. And that something else wasn't a docx file, but we monitor what it was anyway, just in case it was, I don't know, a text file, or they saved it in the wrong kind of format. So I'm going to hand over to Bill in just a second. I thought I had a slide that says that there's actually there are some screenshots that are being taken as well. It's something that we're sort of doing at the moment. So hopefully the aim is that we can not only spot problems using the website, but we can actually see out to all the computers over the whole university from our office. So I will pass over to Bill now, and I will have a look through the chat to see whether you've asked any questions specifically of me. Bill?
Okay, thanks, Graham. I did see a couple of emails coming in about, for example, what it's developed in and whether it's open source or not. So I'll leave you to handle those while I finish up. So last year was the first full year that we ran the EXAMSTART portal for all the university's computer-based exams, and our ambitions at that point were to extend the use of this portal to Autodesk. You may be aware of the AutoCAD and your products, for example, and the prescribing safety assessments, which I think Graham's already shown you, and that's kind of been done by Graham already. In particular, we wanted to add a bit of power to the end of day housekeeping. The obvious thing there is to ensure that people, when they leave the exam room, have really uploaded their answers. It's more of an issue where they're writing essays than it is with something like perception, which will auto-submit on their behalf if they time out. But it's an issue with some other exam environments as well. And we wanted to provide some dedicated dashboard views. Graham's already shown you the exam usage screen, which we've shown in miniature at the bottom of this slide. But we wanted to do something for the invigilators, and we wanted to do something for the exams office, and we wanted to do something almost kind of for us, really, what I would think of as an exam trajectory, the life cycle of a student taking an exam. Partly as a sort of comfort blanket, because we like to see that the student has had a fulfilling experience, that the thing's gone nice and smoothly from the start. They didn't have to wait around too long to start. The thing ran smoothly without any hiccups, and they submitted their answers smoothly at the end, and were out and in the playground playing with their friends when the thing had finished, rather than having to worry about whether their answers had been submitted or not. Don't ask me how I know that. We also wanted to produce some management information services data, the kind of thing that senior managers like, partly to have a better grasp of the risks, because we all worry about the risks, the threats. And we also wanted to get a bit of a handle on where the future trends are. And the main driver behind that is we would like to know whether we're on an upward trend for the use of CAA in different kinds of software, different environments, or whether it's static and we don't have to worry so much about spending more money on it next year, or indeed whether we should be pestering the university to provide more workstation accommodation, or to extend the exam day indeed, so that we can get more sessions into the existing accommodation. And in the years since that's happened, 9 months perhaps, nearer than a year, our ambitions have changed slightly. So we still wish to extend the EXAMSTART portal to new CAA software, and we still wish to develop further our end-of-day exam housekeeping at the end of the day, because that's a risk mitigation provision. And clearly it's of crucial importance that whatever else happens, everybody's answer gets submitted normally. We had an example of a student walking away from their submitted, when was it? This was a semester 1 exam a while ago, before the EXAMSTART way of doing things came along. And it was the day the snow fell and the university closed, and nobody had the gumption to make sure that he'd submitted his answers before the university closed. So that caused a certain amount of toing and froing, and it's something which we are very anxious to avoid a repetition of. When we looked at these dedicated targeted dashboard views, it turned out really that the exams office and the invigilators didn't particularly want this, and we didn't see much point in providing something that people didn't want, so we're going to keep our powder dry on that until they do want something from us. But what we imagined was that the exams office might themselves want to keep an eye on the progress of exams, again as a sort of comfort blanket perhaps, and we also imagined that the invigilators might wish to have in-room display so that they could see when people were ready to finish and keep an eye on maybe people who had a problem. It turns out that either the invigilators are insufficiently technically aware to want that, or that they wouldn't be able to take advantage of it if they were. So again, we're sort of looking after people, we're sort of gatekeeping, I suppose, that aspect of the enterprise until such time as people are either more technically aware or they start asking for it. There's a section I'm thinking about as almost like data mining, where we can predict future trends and get a better grasp of the risks. And that's really just looking at the data set that's produced by an EXAMSTART session and a collection of EXAMSTART sessions, and querying it to see where the important trends are. What we haven't done yet is to update EXAMSTART to support Windows 8.1. That's on the list of things to do, or a list of Graham's things to do, really. And I mentioned earlier on that we want to support open book exams, because at the moment they're outside the scope of EXAMSTART, which means we can't report on the growth or the take-up of these kinds of activities. They're becoming increasingly popular, particularly on the IT side of things, where we have, for example, computer studies students. In the real world, they're probably not going to have to remember everything they're going to be doing. They're going to be looking things up. They'll be looking things up on the internet or the intranet or elsewhere online. So it seems kind of perverse to give them a closed book exam, but they cannot do that, because being able to do these things is an important part of their skill set. So that's something which we're looking at pretty actively. If we're going to do that, we want to think really about which sites should be blocked, how freely, how open book the exam should be, whether we want to put limits on that, whether we want to record their browser histories indeed, whether they might actually form part of the assessment process, of course. But the main point really is to allow students freedom of action without losing the value of being able to monitor and manage their workstations remotely, which from our point of view is a great asset, because it really means that we can head things off at the pass, we can nip things in the bud, and we can really fix people's problems almost before they know they've got a problem. We can pop down there, be at a student's elbow, while they're still wondering if there's a problem or not. And it's a bit spooky for the student, but it's great for us. So, the perfect e-exam experience, and I'm winding up now. What we really wish to provide is an exam portal that delivers CAA, Computer Assisted Assessment, which is obviously effective and reliable and fit for purpose and robust and scalable and simple, because these are the things that people want when we talk to them. But it also, from our point of view, wants to be adaptable and informative and responsible. Now, those demands look to be mutually exclusive, but in fact, because Graham's a good programmer, good programming practice has allowed us to combine robustness with agility, almost like Asterix, the Gaul with his agility, and Obelix with his robustness. I took the cartoons out of this, but it's a little bit like Asterix. That's the metaphor that I think of. I'll come back to a point I mentioned right at the start, some of the affordances of EXAMSTART. What we've really done, when you look at it, as it were, from a bird's eye view, is to provide an almost infinite virtual exam space using some of the facilities, providing some of the facilities that you might expect from a large physical space, which we cannot afford. So the legacy of having these small traditional single-purpose inflexible spaces, the consequence of that are these competing demands, amongst other things. There isn't much we can do about that. The modest size, the broad software portfolio, again, we haven't been able to mitigate that very well. But the physical separation and the public access, we have been able to mitigate both of those. We can now coordinate exams across the universities, and we have done this in different countries, in fact on different sides of the planet pretty much within Malaysia campus, in the same session. And we now run a very simple and very effective, and you've seen the green border that Graham uses as a sort of comfort blanket to tell people that everything's okay, as part of the login sequence itself. So if people are in, then they will know if they're okay or not, and more importantly, perhaps the invigilator will know just by looking at the colour of the screen. Those competing demands from legacy spaces and the modest size and the broad software portfolio we're still struggling with. Close spacing remains an issue because they're cheap by jowl. We really jam the workstations in these rooms to get the best bang for buck. The small spaces remain expensive to invigilate, and the competing demands, for example, of students wishing to use the rooms for exam revision just about the time when we want to use them for exams is going to continue to be a problem, I'm sure. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Bill and Graham. So that was fascinating. So now obviously people have been asking some questions, so if you've got some more questions, please either type them in, or if you'd like to take the microphone and do a verbal question, just put your hand up and we'll hand the mic over to you. So please just type in your questions, or anyone might like to take the mic.
I've been seeing some things in the chat about bring your own device. I'm always personally a bit concerned because a lot of the things that EXAMSTART stops you from stops the cheating about is about making sure that the control is with the university rather than the student. We use VNC to do a lot of support in the university, and it was actually possible for a student to, you needed to be an administrator to control a computer, but you only had to be a user to request for someone to control your computer. So actually, if you could get into Windows, you could request that someone in a different workstation area had control over your PC. So if those kind of things exist on Bring Your Own Device, then that's possible. I saw in the CAA conference someone had a boot from USB stick, which then gave complete control of the operating system down to the student, which was great. But I don't know whether it's our invigilators, but I would be very concerned that our invigilators could find the on button on some students' laptops, never mind boot a separate operating system from a USB stick. iOS, I think, would be fantastic. iOS with keyboards would be fantastic. But Perception have now got a secure browser for iOS that requires you to have the mode that I forget the name of, the one that lets you sort of use it in a store where you can't browse everything. But you've got to add a pin to that, and it's going to be the student that adds the pin to that that assessment. Kiosk mode, that's it. So it's going to be what happens, especially. I can only talk about our university, but at the moment our university doesn't hand out a device to students on the first day that they turn up. Once they do, I think that's going to be the difference, because we're going to know what the student has. I think the American universities have a lot easier time with this, because there is an expectation that they're going to turn up with a laptop, and that laptop can do certain things. It's probably going to end up that our students turn up with an iPad, and then once they turn up with an iPad, then perhaps we can do something based on the fact that that we know what they have. Especially if it's our device, because then if we say, okay, during your exams, you will have our management software on it, and our management software during an exam will add a password onto it.
Okay, Graham, we might hand the mic over to Kurt if you'd like to ask a question, Kurt.
Yes, just adding a comment on the bringing your own device. At our university, University of Southern Denmark, we allow all students to bring their own device, and we do that on two reasons. One of them is feasibility. The resource which will be required for us to conduct digital assessment will be too high if we should have a PC for every student. So we conduct a 75,000 assessment each year, so that will be too costly for us. The other issue is accessibility. Our students have evaluated the system and accepted it as being a good system, having their own PC to their assessment. So the reason to conduct assessment with own device, they have a better acceptability among our students, and the feasibility is better. So just to comment on this, bringing your own device. So, but the problem is, of course, what about, are they cheating to our exam? And our strategy is there to monitor their exams, and we think that is a good strategy. Just to comment on this issue.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. Does anyone else want to take the mic, or just keep typing in their questions? I see people are doing that. Kurt, we might just get you to put your hand down as well, if that's okay. Andrew.
Thanks very much, Geoff, and thank you both very much for talking. That was wonderful. I really liked the dashboard. I thought that was a really excellent thing. Graham and Bill, I think that's probably the best contribution you've made, and I'd be very interested to hear how the data mining is going. Can you give us some examples of the kinds of things you're getting out of that dashboard and the data mining?
Yeah, I'll take that because I talked about it. It's early days. At the moment, we're still building the data set. All we can really see at the moment are the gross trends of how many people are using it. We haven't, as far as I know, although Graham may put me right here, used it to analyse the proportion of failures or the proportion of failures to submit. Certainly I don't think we've yet tried to do that across the portfolio of different exam systems yet. But it's something I'd quite like to do. It's early days. We can see that there is a growing data set, and at some point I think we might know more about what kinds of questions we want to ask. We could just sort of query it randomly, but I'm not sure how much we'd really learn from that.
Thanks for that. Just interested to know if you would be interested in exploring whether the students who use the computer do better on their exam than the same student in the same exam using pen on paper. That's just an idea.
Again, because we don't really have a way of doing direct comparisons with the same cohort of students to see how they behave when they're assessed on paper or electronically. I mean, are you thinking about test mode effects, such as where half the cohort types their answers into Word and the other half does it using pencil and paper?
Yeah, that was my thought, but I better pass the mic to Jessica, I think.
That would be difficult. I mean, I don't think there'd be anything to stop us doing it as an experiment if we could find somebody who is prepared to look at it with us. Mostly the people that use the word processing facility are people with additional exam requirements, i.e. those who, for one reason or another, cannot produce a legible script within the time that they're allowed, so they have a typewriter facility. We would need to set something up. My personal experience is that there isn't very much difference between people's performance doing things using a typewriter and doing it pencil and paper, because these days people are so used to using word process for pretty much every aspect of what they do, certainly from the point of view of producing written coursework, that if anything, I suspect that having to use paper and pen is actually a relative disadvantage these days. But I would need to do the test, I suppose.
Thank you.
Jessica, would you like to take the mic?
Hello, hopefully you can hear me okay. Basically my question is, I may have missed this in the chat, but is this system available for other universities at all?
No, it isn't currently. It's been written specifically for our use at the University of Southampton. That almost hasn't been a decision that has been made. No one has decided, let's go and make a closed source piece of software. But as well as that, no one has come up to me and said, Graham, this is the kind of thing that needs to be open source. At present, it's not the kind of thing that could just be put onto GitHub to be shared, because it does have some very specific things. Whether it would be appropriate to sort of more do a write-up of the things that we did and some example bits of code that would allow you to generate the same kind of thing, then that could be a possibility. But you've also got to remember that it's about 75% programming, but a good 25% of it is group policy and things to do locking down. Because obviously once you get into things like Word, you've got to make sure that the spell checking and things like that isn't working, and the autocorrects aren't working. So that isn't anything to do with EXAMSTART, that's the fact that we have an exam account, and inside the exam account there is some group policies set which then disable things within Word. So it's definitely not something that you could just download from the internet and put somewhere.
Sure, okay, thank you. The only other thing I wanted to ask is if these PowerPoint slides could be shared through this system. I'd really like to send them to my colleagues.
I believe the whole thing is being recorded.
Are we able to grab the PowerPoint slides as well? So those who won't sit down and watch it for an hour can look through those?
Oh, our actual PowerPoint slides?
Yeah.
I'm sure that wouldn't be a problem.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think it's a problem, no.
Mathew can follow up with Graham and Bill about that, and we can, if they're agreeable, we can put those up on the Transforming Assessment website and make a link to that for everyone. I was just
okay. Yes. Sorry. Sorry. Mathew here. I will post it online. So what will happen is after the session, an email will go out when I finalise the recording. The recording goes onto YouTube. People can watch it as a video, and there's a page. So every session on our past sessions has its own page, and there'll be links to any resources, URLs, etc., plus a copy of the PowerPoint slides.
Yeah, thanks, Mathew. I was just going to take up that point I think that Jessica was making, and I think one of the interesting things about these types of activities where we generate a bit of software to do a particular task is that every university is going to have a different arrangement for their student data and the interaction between the student data and other systems. I was just thinking of my university here at RMIT, and even taking a commercial learning management system or an open source learning management system like Moodle or Blackboard. Every university installs them in a different way and has different features associated with them, and it's actually very difficult to be able to put a sort of piece of middleware or third-party applications to that. They often have to be tweaked in many ways, and I think that's probably one of the biggest frustrations we have around these things, is that you end up seeing something that looks really nice, you'd like to be able to apply it, and even if it's open source, it's still quite a lot of work to be able to adapt it to your own systems. Okay, any further questions or comments from our audience? Okay, Graham and Bill, that probably looks like it for the questions that people have at the moment. So I'd certainly like to thank you both for your time today. We really appreciate that. It's been a very interesting webinar, and obviously people are very interested in how we go forward with these e-exams. And it's actually one of the whole purposes of having the Transforming Assessment webinar series, first of all to raise awareness of what's being done in different places around the world, but also to start asking some of these questions about, well, where are we going, and what will our assessment look like over the next 5 to 10 years. So we really appreciate your time, Bill and Graham. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Bye.
And thank you, everyone. And just remember to do the webinar feedback before you go, if you wouldn't mind.